Hey there fellow travelers, Mark here with Wolters World, and today we're here in Stratford-upon-Avon, and today we're going to talk about are some of the don'ts of driving in England. And I want to tell you this right now, don't be scared off because they drive on the left. I know if you're coming from the US or you're coming from Canada or other places where we drive on the right, it does seem a bit daunting. And it's not just the fact that you end up sitting in the wrong seat when you first get in the car, it's also dealing with the traffic oncoming that way, and it's just a different feel that you have. But I gotta tell you, don't worry, after about a half hour of driving, you'll totally get it. It'll be a lot easier, but it's just that first half hour that you're a little freaked out, okay? But don't let it stop you from coming to England and driving around England, because I gotta tell you this, don't think you can truly explore England without having your own car. Because yes, you can go to the different cities, you could do that, but to get into the smaller places and to get to the stately manor homes, you really gotta have your own transportation. Yes, there's public transportation that can take you a lot of the places, but to really control your own destiny when you're here in England, like outside of Liverpool and London and those things, having a car is really important. And when you are renting your car, don't worry, there are plenty of options for places you can rent from, whether you go for local places or international chains, that's not gonna be an issue. The issue I'm going to tell you is when you're renting a car, don't forget you might not get an automatic. There's a lot of manual cars here. Now, this is one of the things that's really changed in England over the last 10 years or so. There's so many more automatic cars. That's a lot easier to get. So if you didn't learn how to drive stick shift, don't worry, you'll be okay, all right? You have to note that when you're renting it. It will be probably a different price. Not necessarily, but it could be. But I will say, if you are driving stick, don't forget the reverse, you might have a little plunger you gotta pull up to put in reverse. Because I know when Josh and I have been driving around at first, we're like, wait, why can't I get it in reverse? What's going on here? There's a little plunger underneath, you just pull and get it in there. And I'm saying that first because it's probably the first issue you're gonna have when you're trying to back out of your parking spot at the rental agency. Now, if you are gonna be driving around England, I'm gonna tell you this, don't drive in London with the congestion fees of the traffic, it's not worth it. So what I recommend you do, if you're gonna be flying into Heathrow or Gatwick, decide, do you want London first or last on your English adventure? If it's last, which I recommend, fly into Heathrow, fly into Gatwick, get your car there, and then go drive out and explore. And then when you come back, you drop it off there, and then you take public transportation into the city. Don't ever, ever, ever drive in London. Please, for the love of God, you do not want to do that. And it's not just the Clark Griswold, oh look kids, Big Ben Parliament issues. Just don't. Now, when you are renting your car, I'm going to tell you this. Don't forget the accoutrement when you buy it. Now, first thing is get the GPS for the car. Because your phone, well, is awesome. Don't get me wrong. It does really well in certain places. But as you drive around the country, you'll notice you're not going to have a great signal everywhere. So you might have a signal on your phone to get the GPS kind of telling you when to turn or keeping things up. So that's one thing I really worry about. Also, on the roundabouts, I find the GPS, like specific things here in England, do a much better job of getting you off on the right turn than your phone does. I always find the phone ones are like about 10 seconds behind the GPS one in terms of the roundabouts, and therefore you're going around the roundabout again and again. And I guess I should talk about the roundabouts, okay? Don't think you're gonna have a lot of traffic lights when you're here, okay? It's roundabout city, county, everywhere here, okay? And when you're coming into roundabout, don't forget, it depends where you're gonna go. If you're gonna go straight, you're on the left side. Okay? If you're going to take a right in the roundabout, you're going to be on the right side, but you don't take a right there, you have to go around the circle. And so what you do is you merge in as the traffic's going. You don't just barge into it. You see if there's a little spot, you merge in as you go around, and as you get close to your exit, you move farther out towards the outside of the circle, right? So you can do that and just turn right off there. And therefore, it's a lot safer that way. And don't worry, if you can't make your turn, you can go back around again and get the turn off when you need it. But that is one of the things that really kind of freaks you out at first. Like, wait, when do I need to go? Just know farther out, it's when you're going to turn off, okay? Think of this kind of peeling off little by little as you go around. Now, when you are driving around, a lot of people get worried, well, what happens if I get tickets, or what are the main ticket things I need to think about? Well, one, don't worry, the cops aren't pulling you over, probably. They have their lights on, okay, when you're here regardless, so you don't have to worry about that one. But I would say this, is don't mess with the speed cameras and don't mess with the bus lanes, because they have cameras everywhere, okay? The speed cameras, the parking cameras, the traffic cameras, you got to watch out for that. You may be going and all of a sudden it says, oh, there's a bus lane out of nowhere, and you drive through that, it could be in the middle of nowhere. They're going to find you, they're going to fine you, and don't think because you have a rental car, they're not going to fine you, because that ticket, it'll show up eventually in the mail for you to pay. Now, a little school lesson for you. Don't forget your letters. M is the motorway. That's the big highway, limited access highway kind of stuff. A, think of A as a road, okay? And so you have more access to it, more roundabouts on it, more kind of going through the city kind of thing. So I like to think the motorway is like the highway, and the A roads are more state or county highways or state roads. That kind of gives you a better feel for it. I mention that because if you're on one of the M's, they're usually faster. Now, traffic can always be fun here, but just so you know that that's going to give you much more of a faster drive than usually the A roads do. I will say this though, don't trust your Google Maps saying how long it's going to take to get somewhere, because of all the hills and the windy roads and the roundabouts. It takes longer than what I find Google Maps tells you to do. That's why I say just do the GPS thing. It makes life easier, but just know that you're going to be going a lot slower than you think you're going to be going when you look at that route, just because of how the roads are. And especially if you're going to do some of the back roads, you know, when you're driving through the hedgerows, don't be surprised if you have to pull off into a hedge to let someone by, because we have these big hedgerows in certain parts of the country, and it's a small one lane, 1.5 lane road, and you're like, oh, what do we do? Somebody has to pull to the side. So you kind of pull in, person goes by and you go, or they might do it for you. Because honestly, don't expect big roads when you're driving through the back parts of England, no matter where you are. Oh, and a little vocabulary lesson for you. Don't forget it's petrol here, not gas. Make sure you do check what kind you need to use in your car, because there might be a diesel, there might be petrol, you know, so you want to think about that. Now, to throw you off even more, don't forget your math when you're here, because when you're doing distances, that's in miles, but when you're filling up your car, that's in liters, so that can be a bit confusing. And I will say, don't have sticker shock when you see the gas prices or the petrol prices when you are here. Yeah, it's going to be more than if you're coming from the US or Canada. Just be aware of that. But overall, for like European prices, I find them pretty fair, so it's not too bad. Like, it's not going to totally bust your budget, but just remember when you're looking at the prices, is that liters or gallons? What's going on here? That might give you a little sticker shock when you fill up. Another thing that I noticed when I used to drive around here a lot in England, don't mention to the locals that at home you drive like 7 or 8 hours straight and it's no big deal. Because I found here in England, if you get anything more than like 2 hours in a row, people are like, oh, you need to take a break. That's a long drive. We need to stop for a cuppa, or we need to, maybe we'll get a coffee, or maybe we get a snack or something. I'm like, yeah, or we can do the 3-hour drive in one go and just be there. So be aware of that. Now, another driving don't I have for you, which also works for when you're a pedestrian going around towns that you're visiting, is don't forget they drive on the left. Now, I know I said that before, but I'm going to say it again because enough people forget that when you're coming out of some of the airports, you notice people on a little bit of the wrong side of the road. So don't forget, stay left when you drive. And when you are driving around, if you're going to be visiting some of these smaller towns, you're going to stay in the B&Bs and everything, I got to tell you this, don't forget to ask what the parking situation is where you're going to stay. Because some places, like where we're staying here, they actually have a parking garage that we can park our stuff in, so it was fine. Other ones are like, okay, you need to park on this lane, or one they gave us a parking pad. We were in Bath when you were staying in the city, and they're like, okay, park on this street and then come hurry and grab the letter that's in the apartment and then go put it in your window so you don't get a ticket. Because sometimes what you'll see is a place will be a perfect destination for a tourist, but the parking situation isn't, so you're gonna have to think of something else. Now, if you haven't noticed, I'm filming in the rain here, and I do want you to know, don't worry about the rain. People drive very good in the rain here. That's totally fine. Don't worry about that. But don't think it's like huge downpours when you're coming here, where it's like, it's like, oh, I can't see, there's so much rain. It doesn't usually get that bad. It's just like a drizzle kind of thing. And I mentioned that because we had fans that asked us, Mark, it rains all the time, then I'm scared to drive in the rain. Look, it's not torrential downpour, okay? This is England, all right? It's just rain, it just comes down. Sometimes it's bad, but those times you're not gonna drive anyway. But honestly, like, I expect to drive in the mist at least sometimes. And that's what I gotta say is, don't forget to really pay attention when you are driving. I know you're like, Mark, I do that all the time. I always pay attention. No, what I mean is, with all of these winding roads and the hedgerows and oncoming traffic from the other way, and then, looking and seeing all the beautiful sights, you also need to realize there's also a lot of people that like to walk around the country, so there's this beautiful walking paths all over the country. There might be people walking on the side of the A road. There might be somebody walking on the side of the road, or cyclists, especially when it gets nice out. People get out and cycle a lot of places. I've gone places like in the Peak District, which was funny because the car I was on didn't have enough power to go up the hill. And so we'd pass the people on the bikes, when we're driving down, then we get to the hill, they'd pass us, and we'd kind of go back and forth. So do be aware of that there are bikers, there are walkers, and the pedestrians you need to pay attention to. And that's why I say just pay a little bit extra attention, because that one little thing of instead of having the steering wheel on the left, the steering wheel's on the right, kind of throws you off. And I want to mention, if you're going to be driving stick shift, a manual, when you look at it, it's in the same position as in the US. So it's like the one first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear. It's the same thing. It's not flipped over for you. It's like the other one. So like we have. So it makes life a little bit easier that way. So something else I want to say is when you're driving around England, don't stay in the right lane. You know, there's the left lane drivers in the US where they just stay in the left lane and nobody can pass because they take the fast lane. Well, since we drive on the other side here, it's the right lane that's the passing lane, not the left lane. So if you're going to be going slower, stay to the left, not the right, okay? Because you'll have road rage here just like you do in other places. So put your seatbelt on, okay? Be safe. And if you're going to be driving around in places like the Cotswolds or the Peak District with your kids, or maybe you have a little rough time sometimes with motion sickness, don't forget a little sick bag, because sometimes those winding lanes and up and down kind of roads can get to your tummy, so just be aware of that. But I will say, for certain parts of England, when you're driving around the back roads, the windy roads, the hedgerows and stuff like here in the Cotswolds, if you do get car sick, don't forget to bring your Dramamine, because there are parts of the country where you can get that. You go to the Peak District, you're here in the Cotswolds, that can happen, okay? And I want you to enjoy your time here, not being like, oh, my tummy. And a note I have for you is just like on any road trip, don't forget to go into the shop when you're getting your petrol and go get some of the candy, because the candy here in England is fantastic and it's different than you have back at home. So grab some for the road trip, because it's gonna make it much more enjoyable, all right? And honestly, if you're driving around places like the Cotswolds, you don't want to pass up parking when you can see it, because sometimes you got to park out of town to walk in, or sometimes you're parking in town and you've got to walk out to see some things like the Wool Church here. So just know that you want to park and leave it to make your life easier. Also, one thing I would say if you're going to be driving around England is don't forget to make like a day pack that you can just grab out of your car, so you're not having to switch stuff back and forth. You can keep everything in the boot, because you're going to stop out and see some of these towns, especially here in the Cotswolds. You literally, it's village after village after village, and some you just stop out for a few minutes just to take in the market hall or a church, and then you're on your way, and you don't have to lug all your stuff in and out. So do be aware of that, okay? Also, if your parents coming here, I want to tell you this, don't forget to book your baby seat or your car seat when you book your car, okay? Because there's not always a ton of them there when you get the airports, wherever, so make sure that's pre-booked. But we always did when our kids were little, we actually brought our car seats from home, because we knew how that worked. We knew how to like lock it in, and that made things a lot easier. So what are some of the don'ts you have about driving in England? Because obviously I'm going to tell you, don't skip out on it, because it really helps you explore so much more. The stately homes, the villages, just the countryside here. It is fantastic. And anyway, I wish you all the best. Have a great time driving in England. And for those that are here, locals or not, why don't you give advice and some tips for those tourists that are coming here, how they can have a great time driving through England. Anyway, I wish you all the best. I'll say bye from here in Stratford-upon-Avon.